experiencing trauma, individuals may go through a range of physical, emotional, and psychological responses. The impact of trauma can vary depending on the nature and severity of the event as well as individual factors. Many individuals demonstrate remarkable resilience and gradually recover from the effects of trauma. While trauma is undoubtedly challenging, some individuals may experience post-traumatic growth. This refers to positive psychological changes that occur as a result of the struggle with adversity, such as increased personal strength, enhanced relationships, a greater appreciation for life, and also a sense of meaning or purpose. Hi, I'm Paige, and in today's episode, I will be talking with one such trauma survivor. Mark O'Brien is a trauma survivor, author, educator, and the founder and executive director of Trauma Informed. He has over 15 years of experience working in criminal justice, addiction, and mental health. He is extremely passionate about helping people grow and discover strength through trauma, grief, and adversity. Welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thank you, Tej. It's so nice to be here, and I appreciate you having me on.
Wonderful. Mark, let's begin with your story and how Trauma Informed came to be.
Yeah. So as you alluded to, it's not an easy story to tell. It's a painful story with what I think is a hopeful outcome, and that it starts about 15 years ago when I was in my last semester of law school. I went out for a birthday party that my girlfriend Laura planned for us for me. And I made the really foolish decision to drive us home even though I'd been drinking all night. I flipped my car on the interstate and Laura died in the car accident that I caused.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so in addition to the grief and the trauma and the shame that go along with an experience like that, I also was charged with and convicted for negligent manslaughter, and I went to jail. When I got out, I thought, I have a law degree, I have a lot of work experience, I have this passion for helping other people. It'll be easy to start rebuilding my life even as I have to live with this pain. And I started looking for work and I couldn't find anything. Nobody would hire me with this criminal record. And eventually I found a nonprofit called Episcopal Community Services of Maryland, and they hired me to help men who were returning from prison to rebuild their lives. And so this was really meaningful for me. And I also at the same time didn't really know what I was doing. So I started doing research on how to do this kind of work. And I wound up finding this nonprofit law firm called Legal Action Center that helped people and did advocacy work when they were trying to rebuild after getting a criminal record. And so I wound up working for them for about 8 years. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about not just the public policy side, but the program side of how we help people who've been through some really hard things, whether it's the criminal justice system, mental health issues, addictions. So I went to the Baltimore City Health Department and became the city's director of opioid overdose prevention and treatment. So I was running this big public health program that then President Obama cited as a national model for the country. And I was meeting all these people who had taken these really awful experiences and used them as motivation for what they were going to do with their lives. And I thought there's got to be a name for this. So I started doing some research and I found out about this concept called post-traumatic growth. And learning about trauma actually really helped me to process some of what I had been through, things I really hadn't taken the time to kind of process some of these things or to understand them. And so I found that really beneficial for me. And I thought, other people could benefit from knowing more about this. So fast forward a few years and I continue to meet these people who blow my mind with the amazing ways that they've been able to take pain and adversity and turn them into fuel for helping others. And I started Trauma Informed with the idea that a few things. One, trauma is really widespread, and it's both a result of and a cause of people getting involved in the criminal justice system, child welfare, housing issues, all these things. A lot of them have trauma at the core. And so I wanted to help organizations do a better job anticipating that and responding to it. And I also recognized that as our country was beginning to focus more on supporting trauma survivors, we were doing a lot to help people and to try to avoid re-traumatizing them or to support them through pain and grief and things like this. But we weren't focusing a lot on the opportunity to also use these experiences as sources of growth.
Mm-hmm.
So I started Trauma Informed in 2019 to both provide training and education and program design for systems that were interacting kind of regularly with trauma survivors. And then my real passion is to serve, to directly serve trauma survivors and support them to experience healing, as well as finding that meaning and growth that can come from those experiences.
Right. So, dealing with trauma is one thing. You are helping out with finding purpose in life after that experience, right? So,
That's right.
forgive me for my ignorance, but how much time do you think it takes for a person to get into that mode?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually a very important question. And as you mentioned earlier, the responses that people have to trauma, they vary. And some people can experience the exact same event and attach very different meanings and understandings to it. So, two people can be in the same natural disaster, the same accident, and one of them can experience PTSD or trauma, while another really doesn't and is able to cope with what they've been through fairly easily, right?
True.
So there's a certain amount of distress that we have to experience to also have
Yes.
post-traumatic growth. So if you're able to get through an experience and you're like, okay, I'm fine, that was no big deal, I'm over it. That can be really wonderful, right? There's avoiding some of that distress is a wonderful thing, and it's a really resilient thing that some people are able to do. In that case, we typically don't grow from the adversity. We may grow for other reasons, but it's not post-traumatic growth. The other end of the spectrum is where people are experiencing full-blown PTSD. And at that point, it's really not appropriate to talk about or think about growth. At that point, people need to get support. They need to get mental health treatment or other support to actually work through the PTSD. There's a middle ground where people have experienced a pretty high level of distress, but they're not experiencing what would be diagnosed as PTSD. And it's during this time that growth can really occur. I think for most people, that means several months to a year, depending on the severity, after what they've been through, they can start thinking about this. But we should never rush somebody through the recovery part of trauma and try to immediately kind of put this silver lining of their experience on it.
True.
There's got to be a healing period first.
Right.
Let's take a break to understand what Chezuba is. Everyone at some point ponders on how this beautiful life can be made more meaningful. Maybe you're a leader trying to enhance your employees' experience at your organization. Or you already work for the community and seek volunteers with state-of-the-art skills to strengthen your nonprofit. Whatever your situation, know that you can make a difference. Chezuba began with this very vision, a vision to facilitate every skill and every passion in the world in meeting a social need. Corporate volunteering has several benefits for both businesses and organizations. In parallel, experienced and enthusiastic volunteers join NGO workers, enabling them to serve the community more effectively. Chezuba offers everyone looking to add purpose and meaning to their lives a chance to connect or volunteer virtually with nonprofit organizations from over 100 countries around the world. Visit www.chezuba.net and explore opportunities to find meaning. Chezuba, your platform to do good. And now, back with our guest.
Mark, are you the only person in the nonprofit who's helping do this, or do you have a team who is, helping out with other, counseling, maybe just being there, or the administrative part of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started the organization in 2019, and I decided to go back to school and get a master's degree in positive psychology with a focus on post-traumatic growth. So during that time, I was slowly building the organization, working with contractors rather than full-time employees. So right now, I have a person who does our website and some communications. There's another woman who is also a trauma survivor who does some of our curriculum development for the trauma-informed care training we do. And then in the course of my studies, I met a group of classmates who had also survived really serious forms of adversity. One of my classmates was an NFL player whose daughter was diagnosed with childhood cancer, and she survived, thankfully. But through that experience, he decided to start a foundation to support other families going through cancer treatment. Another woman has a cystic fibrosis, which is a life-threatening disease that she has thankfully also survived, but she's taken this experience of having this disease and decided to help other families who were going through this. And then we have a woman who is a PhD psychologist working at the U.S. Air Force Academy, who does instruction on sexuality and relationships and sexual violence, who's joined this group to develop this program to specifically serve trauma survivors and help them to experience growth. We call it the Empowers program. And it's an 8-week program that then involves a year of coaching support. And we're just in the piloting phase of this. So we're all really interested in research and making sure that what we're doing works. And so we're in the early stages of implementing this program with a small group of people so that we can test and make sure that it works the way we want it to work. But all the interventions that are built into the program are based on evidence, on real empirical research. So we think this is a really promising opportunity to change people's lives in a really meaningful way.
I'm sure it is. It sounds very insightful, and it sounds very progressive. Mark, you must also need people to collaborate with, institutes, organizations, research institutes. Have you approached them, or have they approached you?
Yeah, we've had some interactions with research institutions through our involvement with the University of Pennsylvania, some other potential partners in the nonprofit space. We really haven't done a great job of engaging with the corporate world. And I think there's a ton of ways that we could benefit from corporate partners, whether it's marketing and communication support, technology support, all the things that the corporate world does. I would say, with my experience in local government and the nonprofit world, typically the corporate world does a better job with a lot of these things than I think we tend to do in the nonprofit world. So we're definitely looking for partners who can help us bring what I believe is a really powerful and meaningful message to the world, really impactful programs. But we'd love to have some support to make sure that they're getting out there in the most sophisticated and effective ways possible.
Absolutely. People who are watching and listening to this, there you go. You've got some help. If you can offer some help to Mark, he'll be more than happy.
Absolutely.
So, Mark, I have one more question. When you say you are helping people deal with post-traumatic situations, there are so many potential triggers to, and it's in everyday life. It's every day. I mean, when you talk about the car crash, you may be seeing the highway, you may be seeing the cars, or things like that. So, how do you help people with these triggers?
Yeah. So when people are still in a really acute phase of trauma where triggers that are present in everyday life are so uncomfortable that they interfere with that person's ability to just live a relatively normal life, I would say that they're still in a really acute phase of trauma where they need a different kind of support than we can offer. Mm-hmm. However, at a certain point, people do recover, and those triggers can still be pretty uncomfortable, but they're not interfering with their life to the point where they're just not able to kind of engage with the world. And at that point, we really do want to prepare organizations through our trauma-informed care training to make sure that, one, they're being cognizant of that. And so avoiding situations and environmental factors and interactions that are likely to lead to trauma and trauma survivors. And on the other hand, recognizing that we can't anticipate every single thing that is going to be hard for somebody. And so starting to recognize some of the signs that somebody may need to take a step back from a situation or may need to be checked in on, and that we can just be aware that these are things that people can be dealing with. Then the other part of this, I think, is that when they're ready, and maybe with a professional who's trained to do this really well, people should try to learn to engage with the things that trigger them, that are things that can't be avoided if they want to have a normal life. And a trained therapist can do this for somebody through what's called exposure therapy. And I think it's really important for people to get the treatment they need for trauma, so that, this is unlike other mental illnesses unlike mental illnesses where there's kind of a biological component. There may be some components of thinking things that just aren't true about a situation. The problem with trauma is that people are thinking very clearly about the reality of what they've been through, but that's leading to sometimes some reactions that are unhealthy.
Well, I think you are doing a great job. Lastly, I would like to ask you, how are you funding this nonprofit? Because mental health therapists, counselors, these people are expensive, right? So, how are you managing that?
So one of the things is that we've been fortunate to get some funding from state government agencies. We're engaging with foundations now to seek funding for the Empowers program. I really think that for us, that is the thing that we are prepared to do better than anyone else, because of both professional aptitude and personal experiences that our staff brings to the table. And I would love to be able to bring my partners on full-time or more frequently to really build this program out and serve more people. And to do that, we really do need to find the support from foundations and corporate philanthropy to make this a reality for people. And the other thing I just want to say really quickly about this is that we see this as a game changer in a few ways. One is the people that we're serving benefit so much from experiencing this growth side of their painful experiences. But then we see a cascade of effects in the community, because like I said, a lot of these folks that I've gotten to know over the years who have survived these really hard things have turned into advocates, program deliverers, people who are out there making a really positive difference in their community. And what we want to do is build those folks up so they have the entrepreneurial skills, the meaning and purpose in their life to go out there and benefit all of us.
True. I think what is needed most is support from the community and the society. And
That's
I hope
absolutely right.
you get that in abundance. Thank you very much, Mark, for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is indeed something that is worth a thought. Recovery from trauma is not a linear process, and it requires a lot of counseling, therapy, support networks, but it is possible. And as friends and family and community members, it is so important to create safe spaces for survivors.
That's exactly right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.